Welcome to What the Freak. Today, I'm speaking with my good friend, Lisa Jean, the Vitality Goddess. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Awesome. It's kind of a longer one to remember.
It's a good one, though.
It's a good one, for sure. Yeah, I'm super excited to have Lisa on. We actually really only met in the last, 6 months or so?
It's been a blur.
I'm like, when was that first sound healing that I went to, that I met you at Corbin's house? Really, I knew about you. I kind of seen you on social media a bit, but I didn't really know you. So it's been a really cool experience just getting to know you through the Conscious Clubhouse community and just in other ways, taking a trip to Globe to sit in a little ceremony together was a really cool experience. Just super happy to have a conversation with you. Yeah. So would love to, if you want to just share a few more details about yourself for those who are listening who don't know who you are, would love to invite you to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Nathan. So just a little bit about me. I'm still on a little journey of discovering who I am, as we all should be, I suppose. But I've been working on sound healing for the last year now, a little bit over a year. And so that's where Nathan and I met in that space. And I just have a huge passion about building community, tapping into communities, connecting communities. I'm just a huge nerd, and I'm a huge student of it right now. I wouldn't say I have a set role, but it's just something that I really enjoy studying, and it makes a lot of sense because my background is in sociology. I went to college for that. So, that's just what I'm super passionate about: community healing, and just everything in between, all of those little worlds that pop up in between all these activities that we do within community. So I guess that's how I introduce myself.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And on the side, I guess I do, I work with herbs. I actually brought a herbal smoking blend for you today. It's a nervous system blend. Has a bunch of different herbs in there just to soothe the nervous system.
This for me?
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Thank you.
You can smell it later. It smells really beautiful.
I can barely smell it through the bag, but a little bit.
Well, good. That will preserve it. But and I've noticed with that herbal smoking blend that it's just really helped me cut back on my cannabis use and develop more of a ritual habit around cannabis rather than a habitual. So I'm still working with that a little bit and discovering what that looks like. And then I also make jewelry. So just a whole little other side thing about me.
Little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Multi-passionate person is one way I would describe it.
And just always following your passions, I think, is what's going to lead you to whatever you define as success.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first place I'd love to dive into, because you were bringing it up just before we started this, is this concept of self-sustainability and community and just that whole little conversation we started to have. Can you just speak a little bit, maybe create a little basic context first for that conversation, and then just go into what most is drawing you to exploring that in your life right now?
Sure. So before we started the podcast, Nathan and I were just speaking on what I'm passionate about and what's been coming up most in my life. And within the last year, I've really been focusing more on living within community, both rurally and urban as well. And, just diving into how do we change the world? Because I think most people want to do that right now, especially with how things are going in the world. And people are really seeking a community to be able to fulfill those needs. And so what's been coming up for me is, how do we focus on that, making a difference? And for me, I've noticed it's starting within, and what that looks like to me is becoming what I would call self-sustainable. And once you're self-sustainable, then you're able to magnetize the people in your life that you're meant to be building with, that share the common goals, and they're at the similar stages in life as you are, similar periods of growth or seasons, if you will. And you guys can all just come together and build something together. So self-sustainability and community, they go hand in hand. And I'm still unlocking what that really means, the term self-sustainability, but I just see it in terms of just, if you look at permaculture and the principles of sustainability and how that works, it's just very interesting to maybe go off of the ideas of what ecological sustainability looks like and how you can transfer that into a community model of people and self-growth and community growth. And I believe it's starting small. Cells grow based off of just one cell, and then we started as just one cell and then became a clump of cells, and the cells became the systems, our organ systems in our body, and we became this living, breathing being. So I believe that making a difference in the world, you have to start small and you have to start within and then grow outward into your communities. So that's, I guess, what's been coming to me lately.
Just some light conversation for what is it, a Monday night?
Yeah.
I don't even know what day it is. It is Monday.
I don't even know what year it is anymore.
God, what dimension are we in, really?
What the freak?
What the freak? Seriously. I thank you for just laying a little bit of context and groundwork to have this conversation, because this is something that maybe I haven't put it into words yet in some of the ways that you have, or dove deep in certain specific ways you have, but I definitely resonate with this concept that you're bringing up. And a couple things are coming up for me that I'd love to hear a little bit more of your perspective on. The first one is, what do you believe it takes for a human being to be self-sustaining? Like, if you had to, lay it out for us, kind of like what's the inner landscape, or what does a person's life look like? Like, how do I know if I'm self-sustaining? What elements are required? Similar to, like, as you could probably describe it ecologically, like, how would you describe that for, like, the inner human experience and, like, somebody's life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did reflect a little bit on this topic as it came up, and just looking at, I think we're all, in one way or another, I wouldn't even use the word victim. I think victim's not the best word to use, but for lack of better words, victims of trauma and other similar things that we experience in this world. Nobody's free of experiencing trauma, and when we experience trauma, it does something to our bodies. It like manipulates the DNA, if you will. And if we don't address that, it will show up in just personal things that are going on in our lives that we carry with us, like anger, lower level frequency of emotions like guilt or shame. And so I think confronting those first is very important to achieving self-sustainability. But, we have to also first be honest with ourselves as well, because, if we're not honest with ourselves and we don't see it for what it is, then we're not even recognizing that that's a problem in our lives. And it may be pouring outward to other people around us in how we carry ourselves. And so that's a good question. How do you even know if you're being self-sustainable? So I think being honest with yourself and, always seeking the truth of anything and becoming a little bit more, objective on your reality is just the most important thing to first becoming self-sustainable. So, if that answers your question. There's so many layers to it.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think it's a really good starting place, if nothing else. And just having that awareness is, I think, a huge step of the process. I'm definitely, like, as you're speaking, like, relating that to certain pieces of my own life and noticing how me becoming more fulfilled and just solid and grounded and anchored in my life, and becoming more, like, having everything I really need for myself, has a lot of that come from me getting really honest with myself and noticing what I have, what I don't have, what I need, what my desires are, and like what is really maybe the piece of me that is like furthest behind, and how can I like bring that up to like the other parts of myself, like bring it up to speed, which is not always easy to do, because even just to gain that awareness can be very challenging. I think like one way I've gained that awareness is through practices like yoga and meditation has really brought a lot of things to light. Working with plant medicines has been another way that I've been able to bring some of that awareness, or even just getting reflections from coaches or friends or healers has also been a way to do that. So I think there's probably a variety of ways that different people, can get that awareness in different ways. But I think that's such a beautiful foundation for creating what you need for yourself. I know for me personally, one thing that I've gotten stuck in a lot is trying to like go outwards first to try to meet my needs. And it always falls short. It doesn't quite do it. Yeah. I don't quite ever get there. When, let's say I'm hyper focusing on just my diet and like just trying to eat the nutrients that my body needs. That might be important and a part of the picture, but unless I'm looking at like the deeper aspects of like what nourishes me in all ways, like what do I need to be nourished in every way, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, whatever it might be, there's a lot of different ways that need nourishment. So for me, I think I've come to a greater level of self-sustainability, which I'm still very much on the journey of going deeper with, by really noticing a thing that I'm using to try and satiate myself and like look at what's underneath that, like what's deeper. How can I like see the thing under the thing? And there's always another thing under this thing, it seems. So yeah, that's just like one thought that's coming up for me on how I can relate to like the concept you were just talking about.
It's interesting because what I learned in college, and I just went back to recently, it's been so long, but it's like...
You went back to college, or you went back to the thing you learned in college?
The thing I learned in college.
Okay.
I mean...
just clarifying.
It's funny. I think it was brought up in a conversation to me, and just that idea got stuck when I was thinking about what we're talking about is... I believe it was a psychologist that created this pyramid, and it's the pyramid of needs, Maslow's pyramid of needs. And it starts from the bottom and works its way up. And of course, the basic need for everybody is, core stuff like food and shelter and water, basic survival needs. And as you go further up, you'll see that community actually comes before self-esteem, which I thought was very interesting. And I had this conversation in several different circles that I run in, and someone brought up the fact, well, he's only human, so he could make an error too. And it was interesting to me because personally, I believe self-esteem should come before community. Otherwise, it's implying that we're reaching outside of ourselves to achieve that self-esteem, which makes sense. I mean, everybody does need community in order to function. We can't all be doing everything alone. So it's a very interesting push-pull almost, like maybe they should even be on the same level rather than opposite. So I just found that very interesting. And going back to also the self-esteem and what is that, and I believe it ties into the self-sustainability. I think at the core, it's like everybody just wants to find the truth and know their purpose here. So I think purpose is a big one, and I don't know if it was on the pyramid or not. I'd have to go back and look, actually. But I think that should be at the very core, something that we figure out and make it a point to know in our lives. So purpose, and what does that look like? And you said you found it through, meditation, or various plant medicine ceremonies, stuff like that. For me, it was... I was peeling back. I peel back a lot of layers all the time when I do this, but just connecting with my inner child and really looking at who I was as a kid before, life happened to me and, before we experienced certain traumas and everything, like who were we at our very core? And so I think that's a huge part of doing the work and becoming self-sustainable is connecting to who you really are, truly are, before, like I said, life happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I really connect with that concept recently, and I'm just realizing this now, that I'm reconnecting with the part of myself that I feel like I lost when I was really young. And this has kind of coincided with me releasing my debut single this last week.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, because like the energy of the song is just like pure fun. Like it's just so fun. It just makes you want to move. And I just felt like there was such a childlike sense of joy and like innocence that I really poured into this creation, into this art, that when I was really young, before I experienced intense bullying and other things, I was like a happy kid, like so joyful, so pure, just like heart on my sleeve. If I was just smiling and running around, like that's like my image that I remember of myself when I was really young. And then at some point that changed. And I started learning that it wasn't okay to have emotions and to express those, especially as a boy. And I started to shut down. And then I went very stoic for many years and didn't show any emotions, and still am on a journey of letting those come out more and letting that be seen. And so it's beautiful that you bring that up, because I really resonate with like that part of yourself that you were before like the trauma and just like harsh realities of the world hits you. Like there's something special about that.
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you just said. Also bullied, and that plays a huge role in your life when you're ostracized by your community like that. But that's the only community you really have. So I think that instills like just how much more important community is than the typical person would realize. I think both you and I have experienced like how important it is to be around others and socialize and everything. And I think, if anything, being bullied, at least for me, made me a master of my craft, like just knowing how to navigate rejection and knowing how to navigate like being ostracized. It kind of makes you in one way or another a warrior when you become an adult. But like you said, like at the expense of maybe becoming a little bit more closed off too, or like, I guess it depends on if you confront the trauma or not as well. But I was totally had that thought on my way here. Just, it is hard for me to express emotions sometimes as well. But when you just allow yourself the time and know that everything's in seasons, and, if there's no emotions coming up, that's not bad either. It's just being in flow with it.
Yeah. I love that last piece you just said of I think at its core, most things are just neutral, right? Like there's not necessarily good or bad, and we kind of put our own perception on them, our own judgment, we kind of make it a thing. Yeah, a lens. Those of you listening, Lisa has some yellow heart sunglasses on, so she's seeing the world in yellow right now.
Very happy.
Very happy. And I feel like in my life, right, I put on blue lenses for most of my life, the lenses of depression, the lenses of just hiding away and seeing the world through those lenses. But it's a beautiful reminder, and I'm so glad you decided to go down to your car to get your glasses, because it's really reminding me in this moment that we get to choose what lenses that we put on. And that's like a skill that we can learn. And there's different tools that can, I think, help us to do that. And then we get to view the world in a different way. And for me, that also brings up this idea of there can actually be multiple perspectives that coexist at the same time. You and me could be looking at the same thing at the same time, but with different lenses on. You're like, no, I swear that this is blue. I swear this is yellow right now. And no, I swear this is blue right now. Or this is red, and it's like there can be so many different views that we're literally looking all at the same reality, the same thing, but through our own lenses, it completely changes our experience of it. And I think that's something that's helped me to find a lot deeper inner peace the last year, especially, is just realizing, oh yeah, like every person is just seeing the world through their own lens, through their own perspective. And yeah, I probably would think that that person's an idiot if they're saying something's blue when I clearly know it's red.
Right.
If I don't realize they're wearing a different lens. But once I realize that, and there's probably a good reason why they see the world in that way, and I actually don't know that person, I don't know their experience, even if I know that person, I don't know the totality of what they've gone through that has maybe forced them to wear a certain lens, and that's all they know how to wear. It's like, it's helped me to let go of a lot of judgment that I had around other people's perspectives and just have like a deeper compassion, as well as self-compassion, when I feel like I can only see the world in a limited way. And it's so much easier just to be hard on myself, but, you know, realizing like, okay, like it's probably just because I've been wearing these blue lenses for so long that I'm seeing things this way. Let me give myself a little more space and open my heart a little bit more. And, you know, find the spaces that I can do that. Which is,
and it's the programming too, you know, lenses are the programming, and the programs, we're just like operating systems. So if you think about it in terms of that, it's, we've downloaded all of these programs from society throughout our lives. Whether they're true or not, though, is, you know, it's up to the beholder sometimes. But yeah, I think the self-sustainability is just becoming brave enough to possibly see that you have the lenses on, and becoming brave enough to just test yourself to see like what the world might look like without the lenses. And that's what's so important about going inward and starting with yourself first, because once you take those lenses off, you can see like the world for what it really is, and you'll see like the people that also have those lenses off, and you kind of attract each other, and there's this magnetizing that goes on.
Ooh, you're like giving me this vision right now of, so I'm like imagining someone, right, who has sunglasses on like you, but they're wearing like all the colors at the same time, or they can like switch them out, you know, they can like pop one up and other ones on. And so it's like, I'm almost imagining you can like go into different environments where everybody in this environment's wearing blue, and you can pop your blue shades on and be like, oh yeah, like I see what you see. And I feel like that's like part of my mission and my purpose is to, I've always been a bit of a chameleon of sorts, and I can just understand different people and go in and out of different communities. And I don't fully belong to almost any one community, except maybe mostly just the ones that I have created. I feel most at home, or like most belonging, but I can navigate in and out, and to a degree at least, like resonate and be a part of those communities and see how they function and live and experience life in a different way. And I just find it so fascinating that so many human beings experience life in such different ways. And a lot of it based on their lenses, their perception of themselves, of the world. And man, that's just kind of a trip to even just think about.
Yeah, that is. All the lenses and the colors, and it makes you very flexible of a person. But you can also lose yourself in that too, like the chameleon thing, or I don't know if that's what imposter syndrome is. I keep hearing that word. But that's what I would think of, is just, you know, I think it's important to just like take time to yourself to come back to who are you and who you really are. So that's why the inner child thing makes so much sense to me, because that was just, you know, so long ago, but so solid. So to go back to that is just, you know, finding your center point or your anchor. So that's why I guess it's just so important to go inward and then come back out when you're ready, and recognize that you go in these seasons, you know, of ebbs and flows. And then to go back into all these different communities too is to just, it's so important to know yourself. So important, so you don't lose yourself in any which way.
Yeah. And I think what you just said really illustrates what you were saying towards the beginning around the whole Maslow's like hierarchy, and maybe these should be on like at least a similar level. It's like I learned things about myself by being in different communities, right? And I can like gain self-awareness and actually learn to love and accept myself deeper through community. And yet I also do need those times where I just take a step away from everyone else's perspective and really just go deep within myself and remember and connect to deeper frequencies of my core vibration, what I'm emitting. And it's like an ebb and a flow. It's like a balance sometimes. And I think both are valuable. It's like if I just sat on a mountaintop and just meditated with myself, sure, I could go pretty deep with myself, but I probably wouldn't understand too much about other people and other communities. And if I just live around other people all the time, then I'm going to not be connected to myself. So I think there's definitely value in both, as you're saying, and probably a unique balance for each person to find what's their best like frequency and seasons and all of that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have been learning that within the last couple of years too. I noticed that like I used to be a huge traveler. I would travel alone a lot. I got used to it. I was all over the place, never really grounded. And then, you know, with everything that happened within the last couple of years, and I know a lot, like myself, as well as a lot of people I know, like moved back home to be close to family. People that were traveling a lot like I was, like, decided to ground down a little bit more and find, like, not necessarily a forever home, but, you know, a home to, like, stay and be solid at. And other people I know that were like that and never left the house or, you know, never left their town or were just really secure in where they were. Like, they're all over the place now, like, experiencing things that they were afraid to before. And for me, I guess it was kind of scary for me to ground down. And now that I have, you know, it's teaching me so much about how I was kind of running away from that and seeking outside of myself through my travels, which I don't regret. They, like, have shown me so much about myself and what I was carrying with me wherever I went. And how, like, it was a really fun form of escapism, and I wouldn't take it back for the world. But, like, it was definitely a form of escapism that was a lesson in my life that needed to be learned that way. And it was a beautiful lesson. But, yeah, it's just learning what are we escaping from, like, within, and are we going outward with it, or are we going more inward? And where's the fine line, like you said?
Wow. I love how you described your experience there. I just want to like reflect this back for a moment because it felt really powerful, which was, I think your specific words were, you know, I don't regret like my escapism. It's like you're taking full ownership just over your experience, to take any of the judgment or charge out of it of like what that word even means. But like, I just felt you really owning your experience and acknowledging like the two sides of everything. It's like you got to explore and really push your edges in that way and had some amazing experiences and probably also had some challenging experiences as well. And maybe in a certain way, it was very authentic for you to explore and you found pieces of yourself, and maybe also a part of you was running away from things or was scared to experience something different, more of like a grounding energy. So I just wanted to reflect that back, that I think that's super powerful to have that level of self-reflection and awareness and just ownership of your experience. Because I feel like, you know, at least in my life, I've a lot of times really judged when I've done things in my past and have kind of pushed them away. Things that I maybe regretted or was at least partially doing for maybe not the best reasons. One example of that I can relate, that I feel like I'm continuing to take fuller ownership, probably still have some more to go, is I went a little too deep with plant medicine for a while and really, you know, went off the deep end a little bit, which I have now a lot of friends who have done something similar. And it's like I started with very genuine purpose and intention, and still throughout showed up with as much reverence and intention as I could to each ceremony. And even still, I ended up doing a little too much, too close together, and got very disconnected from myself in certain ways. And yet I wouldn't take it back because I know why I did it. I know my purpose and reasons for it. And I was willing to self-correct as I gained the awareness of, hey, maybe you're using this a bit as a form of escapism to not deal with certain pieces of your reality, Nathan. And it's time to take a step back, which I spent about 2.5 years completely away from working with plant medicine in order to deeper integrate, in order to open my restaurant, in order to really take all the lessons and experiences I had on my journeys and really apply them in my life so they became more real. They became more tangible, and I really became more of a bridge between those worlds rather than going there because it was fun and exciting and there was so much there. And I had to like grow up a little bit and mature to realize like, yes, those beautiful experiences are there. Those powerful experiences are there. And what's actually the most resonant place that I need to be right now within myself. And that was a really powerful lesson. And now having come back to be, working with the medicines again, I feel like I'm in a much more harmonious state now, and I can get more of the positive benefits with much less of the negative side effects. And I think all of that came up through you just sharing like just such beautiful ownership over your whole experience of like your traveling and your grounding, and wow, like just the value in both. I just really appreciated how you presented all of that.
Well, in terms of what you just said, they say you can only be as spiritual as you are grounded. So I think, when you can see these experiences for, lessons and challenges, and if you can just see that challenges can be fun, we're on a quest here in this life. So why don't we just look at it that way? You can really alchemize something negative and turn it into part of your story. So I thank you for sharing your story as well. Your plant medicine experience is like my traveling experience, Pretty freaking awesome. Probably you've got great stories, I'm sure.
Great trips. Yeah.
But we also see that going into those spaces does not take away your depression or your anxiety. And this actually brought me to something that I did last year. And I've been a regular cannabis user for about 13 years now in my life. And I never took a break until last year. For 5 months, I did it. And I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know when I wanted to do it for a year, and I didn't know when I'd be ready. And it just kind of naturally came into my life around this time last year. And I just knew the timing was right. I knew it was going to be a challenge. And I played a game with myself. I just said, if this works out, great. If it doesn't, fine too. I was very, very patient and gentle with myself, and how I learned how to express self-love and self-care was through that whole process, the 5 months. I just made it a game. I said, maybe I can only smoke once a day. And so I made that my game, and I did it for a week. And then I said, I'm only going to do it at night now and every other day. And then I said only socially, and I just kind of cut it down more and more and more. And I had this habit of, before I was living with my mom at the time, so before I'd go home, I'd always park in my spot down the street at an apartment complex, and I'd smoke my weed, and that was my ritual. But it was more of a habit than a ritual. It was just something that I did before I went home. And I was realizing, maybe this is numbing me out, and maybe this is taking away some of my power. So I still created that ritual of going home and going in my parking spot, but instead of smoking, I decided to just be with myself. And it really showed me a lot of what I was numbing out. It was anxiety, and I was lying to myself about having anxiety this whole time. It was anxiety. It was like stress, and when I could just sit with those emotions and actually allow them to express themselves in whatever ways, like, it's kind of fun and healthy to have temper tantrums in your car as an adult. Like, set a timer for like 2 to 5 minutes and have your little temper tantrum, and then come out of it, and it's just this huge like charge of energy that you just release, So like, after going through that process, seeing really what your body's screaming at you to attend to before turning to a habit of yours. And so that's really what I learned in that process. Each time I just peeled back a little bit more of a layer, and just another layer and another layer. And after 5 months, I was seeing how the world looks so different than it had for 13 years of doing cannabis, like habitually. So that's why I think it's so important to take your habits, whether it's around food or any sort of substance, or, anything really, like social media, and just make it into a game to see how you can like remove that as a habit and use it more constructively. And I think that's like another way to achieve self-sustainability. Just small baby steps.
Yeah. I love what you shared for like multiple reasons. That's so potent. The two things that stand out most about that. Well, first of all, like congratulations for just being such a badass and really being willing to face and address a behavior pattern that was so deeply ingrained in you, and being so honest with yourself and being willing to be with yourself, which is perhaps the scariest thing to do in this life, probably even scarier than death. I think a lot of people probably associate death with being with yourself.
Like they say people always want to be seen, but they don't want to see themselves,
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
I haven't heard that before, actually. Yeah. I'm going to sit with that later. So first of all, that's awesome. I'm working to bring more celebration into my life of myself and others. So I want to celebrate you for a moment, that huge victory for yourself. That's amazing. The second thing I really love that you talked about was you turned it into a game. And that's something I've been really being with a lot lately over the last few years, and especially recently. I actually just switched, I think, my tagline on my one of my social media profiles to be like something like, "I'm here to create a new game. I'm here to play I'm here to play a new game." Yeah. And
hey,
that's,
you want to play a game? Not in a creepy way.
Seriously, it's like I feel like that was the energy I brought to my song as well. Like it's a song about possibilities, and like what if we play a new game? Even this podcast, right? It's like it's a question. Yeah. What the freak? Like what is going on here? Like why? It's like an inquisition. It's like trying to discover and understand and figure out like what is possible and what's really real and what's really happening.
Yeah, and being okay to know that you don't have to have an answer too, or there is no answer. There's no right answer.
Or there's many answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not like, but yeah, there's not like one way to do it. There's not one way to be. Right. And oftentimes when I'm in that space, it feels so heavy when I'm like, it has to be this way. I can't do this. It's just such a space of negativity and just like recurring cycles. And I just love that framework you brought in of like viewing it like a game and making it easy to like lean into and ease your way. And like, what if I just smoke maybe once a day? Let's see if I can do that first, rather than shaming yourself and like trying to, you can't shame yourself out of a bad habit. You really can't.
And I actually say that shame is original sin, like being ashamed of your experience or who you are or where you've been. I mean, if you're overcoming and you're doing your due diligence, there should be no shame around how you got to that place, because, in my opinion, in my beliefs, I refer to God, but, God does not make mistakes. God leads you exactly where you need to go and only gives you what you can handle. And so it's like a form of medicine to go through these lessons. And it's just a beautiful like way to weave your story. So like I say, shame is just it doesn't serve anybody. It's the lowest level of vibration of emotion. So it's like once you can absolve yourself of the shame, there's so much like room for growth and looking at the situation and the truth of the situation and being honest with yourself.
Yeah, I love talking about shame because I experienced a lot of it growing up in the Catholic religion.
Same.
I know you feel me then. Any Catholics or recovering Catholics, recovered Catholics?
Cafeteria Catholics.
Wait, what?
cafeteria Catholics, they pick and choose.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dope. I like that. There's a lot of shame with most religions, honestly, but especially that one. It's got its own unique flavor of shame that you get to experience if you have the
having to confess your sins at, I don't know, 8 years old.
To some old dude who like
just some innocent child. I'm like, I used to pick on my cat.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, shame is so interesting because it's such a heavy vibration, and I think it's only useful in very specific situations on a very specific step on a journey of healing. I think perhaps shaming someone about something might be useful just if they have almost no awareness about something that might be useful to look at. But I think we so get stuck, and really on a lot of things on the healing path, like you get stuck on a certain phase and we keep trying to use a tool after it's already served the maximum of its useful purpose. Now you need to move beyond that. Okay, once you've brought awareness to something, which I don't think even requires shame, really, there's many ways to bring awareness without having to shame yourself. Now, I think the next step beyond that is like, how can I actually create a space to move through this? And I love the example you gave of creating like a temper tantrum container, just like 2 to 5 minutes in your car. Like, that's so powerful and so needed. And I actually just did that for myself a few days ago because a customer wrote a bad review on Yelp and I was feeling frustrated. I felt like it was super unfair and just wasn't able to like connect with this person in the way I wanted to try and like resolve it, and they just weren't having it. And so I just gave myself freedom to just like go off for a few minutes just by myself in my car. And I just said all the things that were coming to my mind, no shame, just got out all the raw emotion. And then afterwards, I landed in a much more peaceful and beautiful place. And I was able to find love and compassion for this person. I was able to set new standards and boundaries within myself for, how I was going to show up with, what me and my team could do, and also what I'm willing and not willing to accept from other people's projections onto us that weren't actually true nor fair. And so, next time around, like I feel more clear on being able to courageously speak to those projections rather than just eating them or just like taking them, which I feel like I've been in the habit of in the past because I didn't want to like offend anyone or come off in a way. But it's like, no, there was actually some heartfelt truth that wanted to be spoken that I was too afraid to speak. That there's some strong reflections that I actually really wanted to offer this person because there were some incorrect assumptions and judgments made about my team and what happened. And, I wasn't willing to do that because I was so caught up in my emotions. And so after I gave myself that very specific container to allow that energy to move, to allow those emotions to move, then I was actually able to get clarity. But it took a space of non-judgment and a few expletives to like really let it out enough so that I could actually come back to a place of truth and love and genuine compassion, because I wasn't so stuck up with all of this energetic like filth that was just swirling around in there.
Well, see, and that's what awareness brings, right? It brings awareness to the truth of the situation, is that we're all human. So of course we're not emotionless robots, even though we've kind of been programmed many times in our system to be. So trying to get back to that can be hard, and that's why so many people are so reactionary, is because we haven't been taught how to manage our emotions. So when we can take that space for ourselves and recognize just what is this emotion, because it's not always anger. It's maybe, and some people are programmed more with anger, like probably you and I are, sounds like. But sadness is one. Shame is a big one. There's so many different layers to it. And so if you can even just identify what that emotion is, that's hard sometimes. And like it was hard for me to identify what that anxiety was when it was coming up when I was not smoking cannabis, because it was like being numbed down this whole time. So just if you're out there and you're discovering, and you're able to identify your emotions, you're doing the work. Like, you really are. Like, give yourself some credit, because it's not always easy to identify those emotions and be honest with ourselves about what they are and where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really big. Just being able to bring that awareness to yourself as you're making progress is such a powerful and useful part of the journey. I know that there's been a lot of times in my journey where I haven't been the best about acknowledging my progress, nor have I even had the awareness of the progress I was making, because I didn't have the right people or tools to reflect to myself how I was showing up different than I used to, which is probably also why I felt called earlier to offer you that reflection and celebration of like, yo, fuck yeah. Like you totally like moved past some things and you really came to a new place within yourself. And that's beautiful. And that's to be celebrated. Like, wow, you really overcame something that had some type of control over you, that you were giving your power away to it in some type of way. And you really moved beyond that, and you reclaimed a piece of yourself, a piece of your power. And how awesome is that? Like, I feel like the world could really use more of that, more of us reclaiming aspects of ourself, of our power, stop giving it away to authorities who don't truly have our best interests in mind, who don't even have the knowledge or wisdom to have our best interest in mind. Like, we have to look out for ourselves first. Nobody else could possibly know me better than me. If I've really put in a bit of investment into knowing myself, like I am my best doctor, I am my best coach, my best healer. Not that I can't and don't get support from others. I do. I very much do receive that support. But if I'm not my number one supporter, like nobody else can be that for me. So I resonate with what you were saying earlier on about, you know, I don't think community can come before like the self and your own, what you can give to yourself, maybe in tandem with it. I really, that feels good. But there's always that like just unique, independent, individual component of like me and my work and my self-discovery, my play even. Maybe the work turns into more play over time. I've been noticing some of that. But
seems like it. You got a little play place here at your office.
I know, right? A little office warehouse play place. So I just really appreciate you bringing awareness to all of that and just giving me a few things to think about as well. It's really, I find it really valuable just like hearing about others' healing journeys, and I just appreciate like the perspective that you bring, you know, your yellow heart sunglass perspective on this moment.
Everything's through a yellow lens today. Most days actually, but yes. But there's a lot of layers to being within community and with self too. And so I think, we've spoken about this before, that we're both bridges, you know, we kind of like to bridge the gap between different communities, and it's almost like this rainbow energy too. And when you were bringing up all the different colored lenses, I'm like, oh yeah, we're definitely like the rainbow children. Like,
oh yeah,
we're just all about like spreading like unity and connecting all of the different, like, we're just the branches, I guess, that are the longest ones connecting everyone else. It's just really interesting to be able to hop between all of those unique spaces. So I commend you for also being that person, because a lot of times we kind of get lost in the flow, and people might forget about us, or we're kind of like that only child that's forgotten about. Speaking from my soul. So it's always like, okay, how do I find that presence? And it also goes back to what I said before, which I think I'd love for you to elaborate on your thoughts about how people, like, everyone wants to be seen. Like, we're in this society where we all want to be seen, but we want to be seen through a certain lens. And we don't actually want to see ourselves without the lens. And so I know we spoke about that a little bit before hopping on the podcast too, about like social media and how we're portraying ourselves is not necessarily like through a filter that might portray the reality of like, or not even the reality, but the complexity of who we really are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to share more of what's coming up for me on that. I'm going to actually take a deep breath and really just feel into that a little more. That's something I've been loving doing lately, is just like taking a conscious pause and really just taking a deep breath, no matter where I'm at, even if it's I'm on a podcast, because then it's like an invitation for others to also just like take a deep breath. Or even when we were in a cacao ceremony the other night, just I didn't even have, like, saying words didn't actually feel as resonant or potent than just literally offering and inviting the group to just take a few breaths. Like,
we haven't done that in a while, sitting through all of that intense space. So, and it also was such a great reflection for me, knowing that you don't always have to have something to share or something to say. And it's such a beautiful part of active listening, is like, you know, even when you're on a podcast, right? You don't always have to respond immediately, or you don't always have to be thinking about what you're going to say next. And I think that's where we get locked in a lot of times.
Yeah, it's a good like breaker of just getting so caught in the energy of things that all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, there's like so many layers here, and they're all just piling on top of each other. It's like things are getting backed up, and I just need to take a few deep breaths to just like just like let the layers land and weave together. And even right now I just feel less anxious than I did 2 minutes ago. Maybe even anxious isn't the fully right word, but there was just, we had moved so much energy and already traveled so much ground over this conversation that I'm like, whoa, like where are we at right now? Like,
it's so true. I feel that too. It's very exciting. I think excitement is the word you're looking for.
It was like a little overwhelm of excitement, energy. And now I feel a little more rooted and grounded and centered again. So thank you for also just being with me for that moment and breathing with me.
Thanks for taking me on the journey.
Yeah. Now I just have to remember what you asked me about.
I mean, I can actually elaborate on it too, because it's something I'm still deconstructing myself. And I think it's just because it was such a powerful realization for me when I first said it, that I'm still sitting with it as well. But it's like, you know, everyone wants to be seen, but nobody wants to see themselves. And it came up because I noticed that a lot of people within the communities, some of the communities I find myself in, a lot of those, some people are searching for like authentic self-expression, and they're looking for that within community. And it really brought me to this idea of self-sustainability, because people are like looking to be seen in these spaces through how they want to express themselves. But are they doing that because they want to be seen like that? Or are they doing it because, or like, do they even know what their self-expression really is? Like, and is it like, yes, there are there should be a need and a catering to safe spaces where people can discover their self-expression in amongst like a community. But we should be expressing ourselves regardless of who's watching, I think, is really what it brought me to. And how do you do that? But by going inward, right? Like, who are you when nobody's looking? And I had this saying like quite a while ago, live life like no one's watching, right? Like, that's what authentic self-expression is to me, regardless of if you get ostracized or judged by your community. So it's kind of like this opposite of what other people are looking for, which is this like self-expression within community. So that's where that idea of like everyone wants to be seen but nobody wants to see themselves came from. It's like, am I doing this just because it's a trend? Am I doing this to be seen in these spaces but as a form of escapism? You know, So I threw a lot at you just now, but
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and it is a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like quite actually the undertaking to even attempt to express all the things that want to come through, and could probably speak for at least 2 hours straight on just this one specific topic, because I actually have a lot of passion for it too. But I think if I can tune into the couple of most resonant things that are coming up for me, and thank you for that beautiful share, and just like laying the land of this like interesting conundrum is maybe one word I want to use. It's great. I haven't used that word in a while, actually. I'm kind of proud of that.
Perfect.
So like a couple things I heard in that. One is there's this kind of like pull between self-expression and then like expression within community. So that's one piece of it. There's this piece of like authentic expression versus performative expression. So that's like another layer to it. And then there's another layer I'm seeing around, how do I describe that? It's like nobody wants to be seen in their worst light or image or even truth, including oneself.
Yeah.
And there's like a running away from that and a resisting that, like resisting seeing shadow aspects of self or parts of ourself that either we or others judge to be not enough.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting energy that I think plays into all of this in various ways. And then even one layer deeper than that, if I can reach it, is what is the true nature of self, of myself? And there's almost, I'm feeling almost like this fear around what if the things that I or someone else perceives as the worst parts of me are actually true, are actually like the truth of my nature. And I'm afraid to find that out, that there's not something underneath that.
Yeah, that's a good one. It reminds me of something that one of my teachers told me, and he said, if you stare into the light, you'll go blind, but if you stare into the darkness, your eyes will adjust to see. And it's just such a beautiful metaphor to like really looking at those shadow aspects, because like the truth really will set you free, but like if you sustain those negative habits or negative qualities about yourself because you don't want to look at them, there's no growth. It's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So that's how I kind of see it when we don't examine maybe like, why does this one thing negative keep happening in my life? Like maybe I'm the problem, and that just goes back to everything I've been saying about, they used to tell us in my door-to-door sales job back in the day, like, be uncomfortable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
that's what my hip hop mentor used to say a lot, actually.
It's cheesy, but it really like put me in that space to just accept. And that goes back to removing the shame too. It's just all these layers of, we're only human. We are not perfect. We did not come here to be perfect. We came here to grow. So, it makes sense that there's fragments of ourselves that may not be the most beautiful, or, they come from like this trauma that nobody can escape. And we can't even say everybody's trauma is the same, like, or, say one's better than the other, or worse, or, harder or easier. It's just, that's really what brings people together, I think, and not in a way that trauma bonds, but a way that's like, we are all experiencing something. And that's the aspect in community that I think people are looking for. But at what expense? Is it the expense of wanting to be seen and then getting stuck in certain modes of maybe this isn't who I am? It's like kind of like the downside of being a chameleon. Or it's also like, getting stuck in the trauma and developing a trauma bond within these communities that doesn't really solve anything. And a really great example of that for me is just like, and I don't judge anybody that goes to protests or anything, but like my idea about protests is like there's all these people and they all want similar things, but they may not want like all of the same things, or they may not have an idea of what the end result is, or they may not have, and they actually certainly don't all have the same ideas of how to get there.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's important to go inward first rather than like go to a very broad community, like one that would be like gathered around like the protest space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought this example up, and this is something that I've really wrestled with a lot because I have friends who are very much in like certain protest communities, and I really do, as much as I possibly can, honor and respect and have a certain just like non-judgmental like support of what they're doing.
Right.
And I don't personally feel super called to those spaces usually, because a lot of times, at least the energy I get, the energetic I experience when I'm in those spaces is one of really fighting against something that oftentimes feels like it's coming from a similar level of whatever the problem is that's being fought against. And it almost is this like perpetuating thing that maybe makes certain progress, but a lot of times I don't feel like I'm in too much of a solution energy. I feel like I'm in a like eternally like perpetuating cycle, and it feels very heavy. And so for me, I do my best to show up with reverence for whatever suffering that specific community might be experiencing, and do my best to better understand who they are and what their cause is and what their experience is.
Right.
And I personally feel more drawn to just in a different direction. And I feel like the best way I can actually support whatever the actual core sufferings are that are being experienced there is by, one, connecting to those people, two, connecting to in whatever way I can relate and work to eradicate that suffering within myself. Yeah. And then three, work to create more spaces for healing, create more space for connection, create more space for the positive alternatives that will actually prevent those problems from ever happening. Right. For example, if there is a community that's experiencing a lot of violence or murder or whatever it might be, to me, fighting against that violence will only go so far. But if we can create spaces where we can truly heal ourselves and see each other truly as brothers and sisters, truly as other human beings that are part of our family, I'm going to do everything in my power. If I have a disagreement with someone, or if there's some type of inequity happening, I'm going to do everything I can to actually love on and connect with my brother rather than lashing out in violence because I don't see him as human, like dehumanizing that other human being. For me, a lot of outer problems I see in the world happen because of what I term dehumanization. And that's why I've been trying on this identity, this term, this purpose as a rehumanization catalyst. And that's been a term that came to me over the last year that I've been really like leaning into and stepping into more fully, is how can I reignite connection and perception of the other as like the self, as another aspect of myself. Like you are another cell in the body of humanity, of our species, and you're actually not much different than me, like at a core fundamental level. And so that's kind of my current experience and connection to like the protest communities and what I experience in that space, and where and why I'm pouring my energies to support those communities. And, and like, I don't know what the answers are. I don't know what all the solutions are. And I think everyone should continue doing what they best feel in their hearts and pouring their love and support to those who they feel called to do so. And I'm going to continue doing my best to create conversations, to create spaces that we can all find those deeper healings for ourselves first and foremost, and then to learn to embody those qualities that will prevent a lot of these problems from ever happening in the first place by becoming just deep embodiments of higher or deeper or truer aspects of self.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Whew, that's a big topic.
It is. It's a big topic. But it really ties into a lot of things that have been coming up for me in relation to like the self-sustainability thing. And, it really, the change really starts within, I believe, because it's just like you said, when you go into those spaces, I mean, they're not for everybody. I think there are good people doing great work in those spaces but also I believe that a lot of us are called to go inward first to figure out if this is a space for us or not. And it's also like, are we speaking so loudly that we're drowning out the voices that we're trying to give a platform to as well? So that's like a whole nother topic, but it ties into like the protest space that I brought up, and just the idea that, you said something earlier that reminded me of a concept of like, everybody wants to talk about how we need a revolution, and, the word revolution gets thrown out a lot, and it came up a lot, all these last go-arounds. Every time there's a major shakeup within society and people come out to protest over whatever it is, they throw the term revolution around. And if you look at the word revolution and you deconstruct it, it literally means re-evolution. It means to revolve. It means revolve, like a revolving door at a hotel, and it's almost like we keep going in these cycles over and over and over again, and we're not actually making any progress. They're just throwing a hot topic at us in the media, and it's something to rile us up and distract us from actually making any progress, because what we really need is evolution. We came here, in my opinion, our main purpose for humanity is to grow and evolve. And the powers that were, not the powers that be, but the powers that were.
I like that. Ooh. That feels so much better.
I'm not going to claim that one. That was the water priestess. I follow her, and she's been using that. But the powers that were, they really throw a lot at us, and they have the best methods to now with the technology that they have and all this online stuff for, Instagram and Facebook and social media in general. It's like whatever they tell us to focus on, we somehow see it as this bright, shiny object and we focus on it, when really like the answer, again, is going within and figuring out what is my purpose, what are my gifts, what do I have to offer the world that's going to instill a lasting change. Create sustainability on a larger scale by creating the self-sustainability, because the laws of nature are, to start small and grow. So, I mean, like, no major body of work has been created, like, from the outside in, right? Like, a book didn't just materialize out of nowhere. Somebody had to go page by page to write it. So,
or even layer by layer within themselves to be even able to go page by page to write it.
We're just books.
We're just living books.
And time travel is real. It's like going back into your past to retrieve parts of yourself that you left behind, So, but just going back to just like gathering in groups and everything, and what we perceive as chaos is really order, because natural law is like there's a course correction of like what's going on in the world, but humanity has this weird thing of approaching what they perceive as chaos, because it's on such a, we live such a small chunk of our lives perceiving something that's really big. The world and the reality that we're in is going to course correct and apply order where it's needed. So when we continue to create more chaos in these spaces, shake up the system, all that, we're just perpetuating the chaos. So I believe these systems, I'm all over the place right now, but I believe these systems.
There's order in your chaos.
There's so much order in my chaos, at least in my mind, if all you could see it. But yeah, so I guess the point I'm getting to here is just that, the systems that we perceive as terrible and bad, like while they are there's so much that's happened and there's so much not working for us as a society. I believe we do have to keep these systems in place and infiltrate them and make them ours instead of starting from scratch and tearing it all down. So that's just, I guess, my 2 cents on the whole matter of, going outward and trying to rile things up that way versus, focusing really inward and seeing where you can slip into the system and make part of it work for you and others as well.
Yeah. Oof. I love the thread you just landed on, and I think this could be the last thread that we kind of wrap things up with. I think it'll bring a lot of it together, which what I want to say on this piece, and I feel like we're going to have some kind of sequel part 2 because there's like so much that we could go into on that. But I love where you're landing, because when I feel into trying to create a revolution and fucking tear the system down, there's infinite ways that I could see wrong in the systems. There's infinite ways I could see abuse and suffering and weird effed up pieces happening, and I could spend infinite lifetimes trying to destroy and try to rebuild from scratch. And once I destroy it all, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm just laying in the rubble and I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is where we're headed if we keep trying to slam our head against a wall in that way. And that's what it feels like to me a lot of, over the last 2 years, these, more reactionary solutions that we've been as a society trying to implement to whatever's coming up. And yet that's not going to get us anywhere, really.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that, when I feel into that, it feels like an infinite, like nothingness, like destruction, just like nothing good is going to come of me leaning into that reality. And it's going to be an endless cycle. And yet, if I reverse the energetic of that, and I just look deep within and instead become curious. Curious about myself, curious about my purpose, my capabilities, who I am, who I can become. And if I become deeply curious about the systems that are in place, about the people that currently exist, about the behaviors that are playing out on our planet right now, what if instead of condemning, judging, and trying to destroy or push away or fight against these things, I actually become deeply curious about them?
I love that.
What would that open up? What would happen there? And when I feel into that possibility, there's actually one very clear path forward, which is showing up to each experience, each conversation with curiosity, showing up to each system that is not of the highest alignment or optimal expression, and wondering first, like, why does this exist? There's some type of human need, societal need on why this thing exists, however imperfect it might be. What is the core? When we peel back all the layers, why does this thing exist? And what's at the root of it? What is the root human need that we're trying to fulfill with this piece of society, with this piece of our system? And once we get to the roots of why these different things are here and exist, now we can start to become curious. How can we better meet these needs? How can we better show up in a way that we can fulfill all of our needs for ourselves individually and collectively? And how can we transform these systems into something that is actually life-giving rather than life-taking? It's like, I was just talking to a friend right before this. It's like a knife can be used to stab someone or to cut vegetables and make a beautiful meal and
or
that can nourish you.
Someone from like bondage.
To cut the ropes, to cut the chains. It's you need a sharp knife to cut chains, but maybe like a hacksaw. So again, even tying it back to something we were talking about at the very beginning, like everything at its core can be neutral. And it's like what we pour into it is what it becomes. So like these systems that maybe for a long time we've poured this energy into them that have made them these kind of like half useful, half life-sucking things, like such a mixed bag of experience. Like what if we could pour more and more just pure love and empowerment and energy into them so that we can transform those from the inside out? Right. And I think that ties everything back to the first topic you brought up of self-sustainability. How can I pour into myself? Because I'm a mixed bag, right? I've been and continue to evolve, but I've been a mixed bag of good and bad things, if we want to label them those things, of enjoyable and fulfilling and empowering experiences, and also like very constrictive and harmful experiences for myself and others. And it's like, how can I purify myself? How can I become a more benevolent, true, authentic expression of God, of love, of whatever the deepest things I can perceive that make life work and exist. And as I purify myself, now I can actually give that energy and infuse that into the systems, into the communities that I'm a part of. But if I haven't done that for myself, I can only give what I have. I can only transmit who I am and what frequency I'm genuinely vibrating at. So it really does come all back to self and self-purification, self-evolution, self-sustainability. I can't be a part of the change in the external way unless I've done that with myself.
And I believe the microcosm really reflects the macrocosm in so many ways. As people say, as above, so below, all of that good stuff. It really is true. What the ills of our society are attributed to our own personal ills that we don't confront, and then we go out and pour out side of ourselves what we are not filling up within. So it's a great example. And just to go a little bit deeper with what you said about being curious, I think it's also being educated, being educated on yourself and what makes you you and what your triggers are is just as important as being educated on the social issues around us, and also educating ourselves on these systems that we criticize and want to tear down. Because when knowledge is power, and they don't want us to even fully understand laws that we're subscribing to and the legal system. We have to become our own lawyers and our own advocates now. We have to become our own best point of knowledge as far as our own individual biology, and we have to become our biggest source of support. And there's all these people out there that work for the system without even knowing about it, and people wonder how can they contribute to this. Well, it's just it goes back to knowledge is power. And the more we know about the systems, the more we can go in and take them and reclaim them as our own. And that can also be said within,
Wow. Yeah, I feel like that's a good anchor point for our next conversation is how do we do that? How do I become my own best lawyer, doctor, coach, physician,
financial advisor.
Exactly. And it's at the end of the day, if I'm not fully responsible for all aspects of my life, no one else is going to be able to do that for me. And yet I'm not an expert or meant to be an expert at every specific thing, right? So it's how can I maybe leverage or utilize my community or others who have gone before me, who have walked certain paths? How can I learn from them to shorten my learning curve or learn what I need to know for myself right now, at least? And that could even, again, not to go into this topic, but the whole education system. Why are we not taught certain basic life skills, and how can we incorporate those so that every human being growing up in any society on this planet can have the fundamentals of how to actually function as a educated, fulfilled, thriving individual so they can actually contribute to society in the most deep, meaningful ways. But that has to start with self. That has to start with creating a culture of self-discovery and self-empowerment and self-healing and development. And so let's kind of like table that for the next discussion, because I'm sure we could both go off
I will just
super
add
hard.
that,
But please add any last thoughts you want to
great
add.
last thought is just that, for anybody listening, it's never been a better time to learn about yourself and about the systems. Like, we have a whole wealth of knowledge at our fingertips. The internet's still a thing for us, Granted, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but, be your own advocate by educating yourself. And there's so many resources out there for any modality of healing that it can be tailored to you. So, curiosity, education, self-exploration, all very important things, and it's never been a better time.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. It was an amazing conversation. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time.
Yeah, I
and
appreciate you having me on. This has been really fun.
Yeah, great just conversation. As I was mentioning to you earlier, I started this whole podcast because I was just having such good conversations with close friends. And I was like, dang, I wish someone could have been there for that. I wish someone could have heard that. Like, the conversation in itself was so self-fulfilling. Just it was enough just between us. And I was like, I want more. Like, I wish someone was like listening in and was able to like experience what the beautiful conversation we just had. So thank you for just showing up with such a big heart and an open mind. And it was just really amazing connecting with you. And I can't wait for the next time.
Yeah, part 2, and it will go even deeper.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks so much.